Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Adrian Cronos. Hi Adrian.
Hi, Sue.
It's lovely to speak to you today. And yes, I think you're our first guest from outside of the UK. Well done to you. Yeah, as our push to international guests, I figured, you know what, we've got listeners all over the world. So I think it'd be really nice to start speaking to people all over the world as well. So there we are. It's a good first, isn't it?
Thank you.
I've got a bio here from Adrian as way of an introduction to her. Mm-hmm. Adrian is a queer stitcher from the east coast of the US. Her work focuses on the bodies making shapes in Shibari style rope bondage. She uses simplistic lines and stark backgrounds to draw attention to the way bodies can contort and morph when suspended and restrained. She uses 3D components in her work as well and enjoys the textures created by hair and natural fibre rope. All of her work is created with express permission from the original riggers, photographers and models, since consent is an essential aspect of tying people. She is newer to the embroidery world and proud to be part of a movement of quirky, subversive and beautiful contemporary embroidery work. And though she is quite private, when she's not embroidering, you can find her rock climbing, running, dancing and chatting with friends. So there we are. Welcome again, Adrian.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, before we get started with your stitchery story today, and I think it's going to be a really interesting one from us all by the bio there, would you like to share with us, Adrian, what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Oh, yeah. So I guess the thing I'm most excited about and what I just started working on is a new series that I'm doing for an upcoming show at the Juxtapose Gallery in New Jersey. So this show is called Femme. It's going to be out in March.
Right.
And I'm really excited about this because this is going to be the first time that I'm involved in every aspect of the work that I'm making. So we were talking a little bit earlier about how I usually pull images from the internet and get consent and then make them. But these three pieces that I'm about to make are with, people that I know in my own home, and I was involved in all aspects of the creation. So I'm really excited to show my stuff in a place that I can go to and also show work with people that I love, which I'm like so excited talking about it. I'm getting the shakes because it's really inspiring to see people that you're close with put themselves in situations that are beautiful and vulnerable and inspiring for art that I want to make. And it's interesting because I like want to post updates about it all the time, but I also want to keep it, special for the gallery opening. But March is so far away, so I'm probably going to put some posts up just because I'm so excited about those images.
And that's the trick, isn't it? Plenty of guests before have been working on books or working on something for, it's kind of like a secret project. And, they share the same thing. It's like, oh, I really want to tell everybody. I'm bursting with excitement, but I can't. And so, but sometimes you might be able to just show a little sneak peek, kind of a little corner or something like that, can't you? So that gets people intrigued and it makes you think, oh yeah, I've done a post.
I've done something, and I've in the world of Instagram, it's like if you don't post regularly, there's kind of a little bit of pressure to post, which is it can be inspiring and it can be tiring as well, because it's like, well, I don't have something right now that I'm working on. So do I go back and post something old? I am working on something slowly. Do I give like a lot of updates and just have it look kind of similar? Or, how do I manage this? Because people do want to see what I'm working on. But I don't want to, inundate people with things that become boring. So.
Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it? It really is. Of course, with the with this podcast and the Instagram channel, well, it's great, isn't it? Because I'm sharing other people's images. So
wonderful.
If it was down to showing stuff I do, I never get around to doing any of these days. So it'd be like really tedious. Do any, talk about it all the time. Never mind. Yeah. So I can see that being really interesting, and we'll come back to this idea of the consent and when we're talking about inspirations, because I've got quite a few other questions for you. And yes, so the subject here about people being tied up is quite different, because normally we're talking about pretty flowers and nice landscapes and all the rest of it. So this is what I love about textile art and embroidery, because it's just infinite in how you can express yourself, your feelings, the things around us. It's just brilliant. It really is. So I'm just really, really pleased that you're so excited about this. And March will be here before you know it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I always thought of embroidery as, the pretty flowers and the wedding announcements and that sort of things until I saw the work of Megan Willis. I don't know. She's American, I believe. I think now she's in Japan. And her handle is Suro Bride on Instagram. But I found her stuff in 2011, 2010. And she does these beautiful portraitures and images that are sort of altered images of women and trans people and men. And they're just so lovely. And that was the first time that I saw embroidery, contemporary embroidery that wasn't, the flowers and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is just glorious. And she has so much movement in her work. The simplicity of the embroidery highlights how accessible it is, but then the complication of the image, because she does these faces and multiple hands and this really complicated hair, just shows you that a simple backstitch can create an amazing image when you really apply it.
Yeah. I keep going on about backstitch, don't I? So we'll get on to stitches as well. But so many people agree there's so much you can do with a simple backstitch, so that it's the image is the star rather than the stitch. Whereas in some other styles, the stitch is the star, or the colour or the texture is the star. We were doing about gold work last week, the sparkly fabric and sparkly threads and the way it's done is the star. So yes, I think it's really nice that regardless of the subject, it's a combination of the subject and the stitch, isn't it, really, which makes something so interesting.
Yeah.
You were inspired by that. So how did you first get interested in embroidery and textile art? Who taught you and what sort of things did you do, Adrian?
My grandma taught me many years ago. So I don't know, she's no longer with us, so I don't know how she would feel about my current work. But she taught me as a child and also taught me how to knit and sew, and all of my skills pretty much go back to her. And then I would embroider on and off as like presents and things for people. And then, a couple of years ago, I really got into it, and the internet helped me gain more skills. Like I learned a French knot from a YouTube video.
Yay! Good old YouTube.
Yeah, Grandma had passed by then, so I wasn't able to learn from her that one. But I sort of learned from that. And then one day I was realizing that I was looking at all these really beautiful images of people who were suspended or who were tied up, who were restrained in different ways. And the shapes that their bodies made were just striking. And I was like, you know what? I could do this. I could make this beautiful image with this wonderful medium and put these two things that I love together. And I tried one and it was terrible. And I tried another one and it was wonderful. And I still have my first and second pieces. And I'm really happy that I had an opportunity to put those two things together.
To me, the interesting point was when you've been doing embroidery all this time, and then suddenly you've been sparked by seeing those images and thinking, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I can do this in embroidery. And so you brought, as you would think, two completely opposite worlds together to create the art that gives you pleasure and that other people are enjoying as well. So that's, I think that's wonderful. It's a really wonderful story, is that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking, I like kind of the harshness also of the images that I use. Some people see them as very harsh, whereas other people see them as very gentle. Like you look at yoga poses and you think, that person is really, zenned out. But then of course you take a very similar pose, you put that person in rope and it's like, whoa, people have a very strong reaction. Whereas if the rope wasn't there, it would be, this serene sort of image. And the flip of that is when you look at embroidery, you're like, oh, thread, lovely. But then you don't think about the fact that like a needle pierced a piece of fabric over and over. There was a lot of stabbing involved in that process.
Yes.
So I think both of those, shibari, bondage, and embroidery, have a soft side and a harsh side, which I like about putting the two of them together.
Yeah. And obviously we've got some of the images that Adrian's done are on her episode of Stitchery Stories. And as usual, I've carried on without saying anything about links. The best, before I forget any further, the best place where you can see the images that Adrian is creating is on her Instagram feed. That's the one channel that you keep going, isn't it? And she is known as @riggedthread, and it's rigged.thread. Obviously, that link will be in her episode. So you can see the sort of images. And that is a very interesting point there about, firstly, people's bodies can move in all sorts of different places with or without rope. And it's interesting that you get that different reaction with or without rope. And secondly, with your artwork, then you've got that simple outline, and then you've got the extra textures in there of adding the rope and hair. No, you put hair in there as well.
Not actual hair, just
yes, that's what I meant. Yeah,
turkey stitch.
Yeah, turkey stitch. That's it. Oh, dear me. Yes, I think you're bringing out some interesting contrasts there in your work. So, as in terms of inspirations, then obviously there was that turning point, wasn't there, when you thought, oh, do you know what, I can do this. I'm inspired now. I've gone past the flowers, and I'm inspired now by the movement of bodies and the way, the shapes that they make. So that was a kind of a good inspirational point there. Now, I also wanted to come back to when you were talking about being inspired by those shapes. And then also that how you started was with images. So do you want to just talk us through a bit more about that aspect of it, Adrian, and then how you've moved now to what you were talking about as your introduction about, kind of being more involved in the whole process?
Yeah, so the first images that I made were stock photos. The first two that I did, I found, and they weren't cited. And then when I started looking for more images, because I didn't have photos to work from myself, there's a number of people on Instagram and different sites that post images of their bondage experience. And I realized I wanted to use those, but it would be inappropriate to use them without asking, in my mind.
Yeah, that's very true. And can I just say, I had no idea people posted images like this on Instagram.
Oh, there's a world out there.
I'm sure there is.
Do be careful. You'll get lost in it. You'll get lost. So yeah, I started finding some people, and I I think it's really important because when a model and a rigger are working together, they're negotiating, if everything is going right, they're negotiating what that model's body can do, what the rigger's skill level is, what that model is comfortable in. It can be a sexual experience or not for that pair. And so there's a constant conversation about what's going on. And then if I when I roll in and ask, and then remake that image, if I don't respect that conversation, I think I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And so I asked the models, and I asked the models and the riggers, and if there's also a separate photographer. In some cases, there's also more people involved to support folks as well. I ask each person if I can create the work. That takes some time.
Yes.
And there are sometimes people don't ever get back to me. There are some people who say no. And if they say no or don't get back to me, I don't make the image. So I wait for consent to create the image, post the image on Instagram, sell the image, and put the image in a gallery. And I now ask if people want specific hashtags or, don't want specific hashtags involved, because hashtags are a way that you can search for images on Instagram. And that conversation is a way for me to show respect to the work that they've done, to show respect to the dynamic that those 2 or 3 people have. And I think it's also a way, so it's to show respect in like the setting of like, you just got tied up by somebody and I want to respect that. But I think it also respects the artistic aspect of it. A lot of people discuss on Instagram that their work gets taken or stolen or reposted.
It's a massive problem, isn't it?
Yeah. And I find that really frustrating. And it's just an opportunity for me to say, your work, you model and rigger and photographer, your work is the inspiration and the reason why my work can exist. And I think that conversation is really important. I'm not special. My creativity comes from inspiration from other people. And that conversation is, I think, really valuable artistically. And in terms of the fact that this is a situation where somebody was tied up. So that's kind of where that consent comes in for me. I think also it reminds the world that like these images are of actual people. This isn't just a picture or an embroidery piece. There was a person at one point who was hanging from a hard point in the ceiling in rope and in some sort of wonderful pain or ecstatic pleasure. Who knows? Maybe both, probably both. And that was a real experience that someone had. So their at least handle should be still a part of my work, because my work could not exist without the experience of somebody else.
And what sort of reaction do you get to your work?
It's interesting. I have only seen my close friends respond to it. I have also seen it shown in a gallery that was also a dungeon. So everybody that was involved in seeing that were kinky folks who, there were people getting whipped in the background and my art was up. So they were all, they're all like, "Woo, this is fun."
So it's back to that community aspect again, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. But I haven't been able to see the art world respond to it yet. I have been able to see my mom respond to it, who was very concerned and then loves me enough to take the time to think about why she was concerned and have conversations with me. And then, we've come to an understanding about, my safety and my choices in my life. And so other than the kink community, I haven't been able to see the art community respond to my work because I've only shown in a dungeon and then over in LA, and I haven't been able to get to LA to see people respond to my work. So I'm excited to go down to New Jersey and sort of watch people respond to my thing.
That's going to be really interesting. Yeah, and I'm sure the conversation with your mum was an absolute classic. can only imagine how that went. Yes.
A little bit of crying, not gonna lie.
Oh dear. So that's really interesting. So actually it's also going to be quite interesting what response we get to this podcast episode as well. Yeah. Really interesting to see what happens there. But
Sue, you're brave.
No, I'm absolutely fascinated by it. To me it's a big wide world out there, and everybody is all, somehow we're all connected and we're all sharing interest in things. And I think just because different people's subject matter is different than what other people's are, it doesn't make it right or wrong or better or worse. It's just a different form of expression. So that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
There we are.
And you and I were talking about the fact that, both of us tied knots in Scouts as a child. And I think that's important to note. Like, everybody in their life has tied a knot once or twice, and probably everybody in their life has had a talk with grandma about embroidery. Well, not everybody talks to their grandma about embroidery, but my start was tying knots in my version of Scouts, the American version of Scouts. And, my grandma taught me embroidery, and it took me just to a different place than other people.
Yeah, and it was actually quite funny when I was saying, I don't think I know anything about bondage or ropes or anything. And then I suddenly thought, well, it was only a year and a half ago that I stopped being a Scout leader, and we used to spend ages teaching all the kids how to tie knots for different reasons, but I was still there showing them how to tie knots. It's like, there you are. There we are then. Yeah, so I thought, yeah, marvellous. We've basically mentioned about good old backstitch there, right? So your work is very, you've got kind of three main threads going through it. So there's the shape of the bodies in backstitch, and then you've got the rope aspect, and then you've got the embroidered hair. So how do you what techniques do you use for those?
So the hair is turkey work, which also learned on YouTube. And I've spent a lot of time looking at used thread. A woman named Rachel, her Instagram handle is used thread. And I pay a lot of attention to the work that she does because she uses color in this beautiful way in terms of hair. So I have a large collection of browns and blondes and reds, and I just am very thoughtful about what colors I put together for the hair. And then I brush it, and sometimes I put it in tiny rollers, and sometimes I braid it, and, to make the texture. And that was, that's really inspiring. And then the actual rope that I put on top of my image, I'm zooming into the photos that I'm looking at and being like, okay, where does this rope go? And also, as I get better at my own knot work, I can be like, oh, that's a lark's head, and that's a bowline, and that's, I know how all this works. And so then I'm using little tweezers to like pull the thread through, and, well, it's not thread, it's string, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would call it, actually.
Hemp.
Yeah, it's hemp.
Yeah.
And
string. It's not yarn, is it? Yeah, string might be a best idea to talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll call it string. I use that hemp string and tie those little knots with the tweezers, and I have my headlamp on, and it's pretty hilarious. And when my friends have seen me do this, they're like, "What? You look ridiculous."
What are you doing? Yeah. So how big are these things? Just to get, so obviously quite small if you're using tweezers and you're peering at it with your headlamp.
So I usually work in 6-inch rounds.
Right.
The largest ones I've done are 10-inch, and I just started a series that are in 3-inch rounds, and those are just torsos, images of torsos, which I feel a little weird about, because as soon as you chop a person's head off, it gets really objectifying. So I'm not as invested in those as I thought I would be at the beginning.
Yeah, so that's obviously challenging you in terms of, as you say, it's not a person anymore, is it? It's a part of a body, and that is different. Yeah. Yeah. Technique-wise, then, so there's your main things. Is there anything else that you sneak in there?
Sometimes I use a French knot here or there. Mostly if somebody has jewelry that I want to incorporate, like a piercing, that I'll use a French knot to show a piercing.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I'm trying to include more of the hardware. So I'll include like found objects, like I don't know what they're called, little metal rings and like a bead or two to highlight different hardware that people use to suspend or that people are wearing in their images.
Right, yeah.
That's another technique, I guess.
Yeah. Where would you say then, obviously you've been, it's a couple of years since you've been inspired and started doing this.
Mm-hmm.
What's been the highlight so far then, Adrian, with the art that you've been creating? You've mentioned, a couple of shows and things. So, what particular has been the things that you've been really, really pleased about and has been a real highlight for you so far?
Well, the first show that I was accepted to was a huge highlight.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. I forget who said this a little while ago on your show, but somebody was saying that every day is a highlight and how cheesy that is, but it's also really true.
Yeah.
But that first time that I was accepted to a show in LA, Stitch Fetish 6, was just, I was over the moon because it was the first time I submitted. It was the first time I wrote up, a contract, and felt very legitimate. But also, other highlights have just been being able to talk to people about things that I love. And right now, this is a highlight.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
And really, I love your stuff. It's hard for me to choose. And I've wrote something down that was a highlight, and now I'm reading it and I'm like, no, this is the highlight right now. But what I have written down is actually feeling comfortable to talk to my mom about my work and having a conversation with her where she was receptive to celebrating something that I was really proud of that was hard for her to celebrate. And just the highlight of like having a really valuable relationship with my family. And that's a highlight that I keep coming back to over and over again that I think will stay up in the top realm for a long time.
Well, I think it has to, because that is such a powerful thing that you've just shared with us, though, that it was a highlight to be able to speak to your mum. And I know I was kind of joking before about, I can imagine how that went, but it's always difficult, isn't it, talking about very personal things and opinions with family members when people are quite entrenched in what their hopes and dreams are for their children, and then when you're doing what you want to do isn't necessarily what they wanted you to do, it's always hard. It doesn't matter what the subject is. So that was a very powerful thing to be highlighting as a highlight, and I think that's it's just wonderful that it's possibly changed perceptions, and as I say, it's something that you're also proud of and your family understands you a lot better. So I think that's a wonderful highlight.
Yeah, I do too.
We often talk about disasters and UFOs and things, but we were talking before, then that's not something that you've really got to share with us. But one thing I was really interested about was you are a full-time employee, and it was really, and this is a challenge that lots of us have, is finding the time to actually spend the time doing the hobby that we love. So how do you actually organise your creative time, given that you don't do this full-time, you've got a full-time money-earning job, and you fit all of this in around the side. So how do you manage that, Adrian?
It's the thing. Well, it's interesting because one of the biggest liberators of my time was getting a light box. I would never think that buying a light box would change my life. But to be honest, how I started transferring my images is I would tape the image to my window.
Oh, yes.
And I would hold the fabric over the image and I would trace. Oh gosh, it was a terrible experience. But I couldn't do it during the winter.
I'm going to say it's a bit chilly, isn't it? And not very bright.
Not bright enough.
Yeah.
So I would rush home before I had my light box. I would rush home, trace something, and then have a project to be like, whew, okay, I'm good for another month. Or I would trace a whole bunch of projects onto my fabric.
Yeah.
But that really limited the other things that I could do. I couldn't run because then it would be too dark to run. So I'd have to choose, do I want to run or do I want to transfer an image today? So I think the way that I manage my time now is buying a light box so I can, transfer it at night. And then, podcasts as opposed to TV is a relaxing thing.
Yeah.
And just knowing that I won't get stuff done as fast as I want, that there will be times that I will be at my job and thinking about embroidery and being like, all I want to do right now is embroider, but I can't because I'm at my job, and that's okay. And I think that's one way that I manage it. Another is I sometimes take little hoops and I'll put my image in the little hoop so I can embroider while I'm on the train or while I'm traveling without, sitting next to somebody with this, naked body out.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting thing for the train, wouldn't it?
I have had some conversations with people where they're like, "What you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing, just regular stuff."
Yeah, I know. When I was I had a quite horrifying experience when I was in Japan. I used to work for Nissan, and I went to Japan to work for 3 or 4 weeks. We went for a project, and we were stuck on this train. And I used to kind of saw the same people each morning, and I was quite horrified looking around, and there's all these guys reading these, is it manga comics? But it's like porn in cartoons, and you're just like there on the train. I'm looking at it, thinking when I was going, am I imagining this? Am I actually seeing this? No, it's true. And we're all going, look. So,
all right, putting all this out in public, folks.
Sorry, I interrupted with a random story there, but anyway.
And you said you wouldn't have anything to connect about.
I know. That just popped into my head. Oh dear. Anyway, yeah. So doing bits and pieces on trains. Yeah, that's another good way of organising your time as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And just knowing that I should only work on one project at a time. Like trying very hard to limit and streamline, and know that I could do 14 things, but really to do it well, I should just do one. And then, I'll listen to your podcast and I'll hear people talk about, oh, well, I can only embroider while my child's napping. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
No, I have to just deal with, a different time constraint, a 50-hour work week, and we'll get it done. And I always do. So just passion and streamlining. I think that's, and my light box. Those are the things that keep me going.
I love the light box. That's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it is when it starts getting dark, you do have to make choices, don't you? I mean, I like to run. And for me, if I left it to the end of the day, I wouldn't do it. So I get up really early and go off down the seafront and do it. And people look at me as if I'm mad. I was down there this morning. It was wind and rain, all the rest of it. But it's like, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. You come back feeling absolutely amazing just because you were stupid enough to go running along in the dark, in the rain, next to the sea.
Yep.
But there's lights on, and there's a few, even at 6 o'clock, there's a few dog walkers around, and all the rest of it. And it's a little quiet place I live at, so I don't worry about that. But yeah, it's like, well, that's when I have to go running. Why don't you go later? Well, because later I'm probably working, or I speak to a lot of folks in the States, so I need to sometimes on an evening. I'm still working. I've got clients all over, and I've got my son and my podcast, and then my stitching is, gets to the end of the day, and I'm too tired. I'm off to bed. So, but I am going to do some today. I'll try and do it a couple of nights a week. I try and do something. So, yeah, Wednesdays is a good night for me to do that. So, yeah, we're all operating, aren't we, Adrian, with a different time constraints, a different reality, a different set of things to deal with. But I think the important thing is we manage it, do the best we can. That's all we can ever do. Do the best we can and see what comes out. We may not be as fast as what we would like, but I don't think that matters. It's not a race, is it?
No. It's not. And it's better to make, in my mind, it's better to make something beautiful and slow than super fast. And, then you lose track of the other things that you care about in the world. Because we have so many interests and we're such dynamic individuals, got to leave space for it all.
Yeah, it is. That's it, leaving space. And that's something I was talking about with one, I think it was a Louise Gardner. It's the idea of leaving space or making space for things to happen. So, yeah, and that's really, really important. So, right, well, there we are. We've filled up our time. Anyway, there we are, Adrian. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you. I've so enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure everyone will find this every bit as fascinating as I have. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It was a joy.
It's been absolutely wonderful. And people, get yourself an Instagram and go and follow Adrian. She's at rigged.thread. And it'd be really, really nice to see how you get on with your exhibition and all the exciting things that you're planning as well. Thanks you so much for sharing your story with us today, Adrian.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Bye now.
Bye. If you liked this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and offers from our lovely guests. Please visit stitcherystories.com to join the fan club. Of course, if you have iTunes, then subscribe there to automatically get new episodes. And why not leave us a review and rating whilst you are there? So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. So keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.